I'm very pleased to have Adam Rapa. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's a Rapa.
No,
really. No, it's a Rapa. Quite simple. Awesome. I'm so glad that you agreed to see me. And I drove all the way out here to Liepāja from Riga, and you're doing a concert here tonight. Mm-hmm. You got some rain already and everything. So you're refreshed and everything?
It was a lovely afternoon.
It was a great drive.
Kind of a folk festival happening over there, which is just nice. So, nice. No worries.
So maybe a few words about like a CV in 1 minute about yourself, and then give us something like maybe a thought or your pattern, or what do you feel like is the one thing that helped you along your way to, improving on trumpet or just, a mental state of mind. Yeah. What was it that kind of,
Yeah, okay. I'll see if I can squeeze all that in. So I'm American. I'm from Boston, and I grew up in a great environment, musically speaking. I had an excellent teacher when I was little, and a lot of opportunities to learn, both in rehearsals and in school settings, but also just on the bandstand. All kinds of music, jazz and funk, hip hop, R&B, salsa, cumbia, merengue. Playing with a big organ in a big Roman Catholic church, and Italian feast bands. It goes on and on and on. And I had access to all of those scenes. I had the opportunity to learn from greats in every one of those genres. And I left home when I was 21 and joined a Broadway show called Blast for 7 years, which is this mega show with lots of brass and percussionists and dancers, all dancing, doing crazy choreography on stage while playing. So we got extensive dance training and acting training for that. Oh, wow. Not acting as in with dialogue, but learning mostly how to emote, how to communicate with your eyes, especially while you're playing. So we got an education in just opening up, really, and connecting with the audience more. So that was brilliant, and it kept me in shape, and that was the equivalent of going to university for me. Basically, that was traveling, touring family, and we had monumental listening sessions. with so many people. There was like 70 people in the cast, and with all of that knowledge that was just kind of being shared around, and MP3 trading, and it was great education. So my background could maybe be summed up in one word as diverse, in terms of the
that's the best kind of background.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the kind of thing where most people need to move to a different city or go to a university specifically to get that kind of scene, whereas I grew up right there. So I feel really, really lucky with that. Also, my mom was incredibly supportive, and I had gigs from the time I was 13, 14, and she drove me to everything. So, and even if it involved driving to the next state and her sleeping, because it was a private function or whatever, just sleeping in the car, and then I'd, 2 a.m. and I'd come out.
And now we're going to go to a commercial break. We'll see you right after this. Stay tuned. Yeah. Anyway, yes.
Anyway, so my mom drove me to everything, and just made sure that I always, even though I didn't come from money, and we really didn't have any money, but she always made sure that I had a good trumpet, and I had my lessons, and yeah. So the other description that I would affix to my upbringing would be a non-dogmatic approach to life. I wasn't raised with any organized religion or any strong belief patterns, even aside from just a general sense of morality and the golden rule, and that gave me the opportunity to not discriminate against any other groups of people or anything or information, and I guess it gave me a clean slate to try to make connections between disparate sources of information, knowledge, And the same goes for music, especially with music, because I didn't learn from playing out of the Arbin book. I didn't have a traditional trumpet education in that way. It was pieced together from different inspirations who had very different tastes and different knowledge bases. So what I've managed to put together for myself is just a collection of the things that resonated true to me, or resonated, just felt like, that speaks to an aspect of myself, of my personality.
And you got to give everything a shot. I mean, right?
Yeah,
like trying and keeping an open mind.
Sure.
And all that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right next to Berkeley College, where I spent a lot of time, without actually attending there, there was a giant 4-story Tower Records and one whole floor the size of a supermarket for jazz, classical, and world music. It was amazing. So from the time I was 13, I was buying CDs just out of curiosity, whether it was because I was intrigued by the instrumentation or just something about the artwork, kind of just something, this one disc was glowing.
How much do you have in your library?
Oh, I bought thousands of CDs in my teen years, and now I've got a Spotify account, so who needs CDs, right? Actually, a lot of the things that were most influential in the development of my voice aren't even on CD or aren't digitized, aren't on Spotify. There's a lot of that stuff. So I'm very glad that I still had that sort of old school analog education in the beginning, and I did the majority of my transcribing and growth in terms of improvisation before YouTube, before it was so easy to. So it was one of those back in the day when it was hard-earned knowledge, where you really had to.
That's the knowledge that sticks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unlike now, it's like, oh, what was it again? Oh, yes. Okay, I got it on Google or whatever.
Exactly. You tend to have more reverence for the information, that you really have to go out and seek it. I still remember a lot of the information that I read in liner notes from records or CDs. And it's one of the biggest shames one of the only things that's a shame, honestly, about the digitization of music, because I love having access to so much music. But just the absence of the liner notes, just that one little detail that gives you all the backstory about the music. And I wish that I could offer people liner notes in my recordings that are on iTunes, for instance. But
I feel like that's a simple fix, though. I mean,
you can get the information out there.
The text is it's all digitized anyway. You can just put it with the song and just like one swipe, and you get the liner notes. Like, doesn't seem like a big deal.
Yeah, but it's the way that people are learning. I'd say that kids these days are learning is different,
right?
And they, I read an article recently that accurately described my generation. I don't know how old you are. Maybe we're in the same. We're kind of 1 foot in old school. We lived analog childhoods and digital or synthetic adulthoods, and so I don't actively participate in social media the same way. I don't have the same. In any case, that's certainly been an influence in how I learned and how I can, and also how I teach. I don't even really give people exercises all that much. I really introduce concepts and say, and here's an example. Here are 3 different ways, theme and variation. Here's a way that you could use this exercise, or twist it this way or twist it that way, to further your understanding, your mastery over this concept. Whether it's flexibility or just opening your aperture, opening your tone in general, or coordinating the motion between the lips and the tongue. Instead of just saying, do these exercises, say your Hail Mary 12 times, whatever it is, it's I would rather that you just understand the physics behind how flexibility is happening, how we click from this one note to another, and just give you all the tools that you need in order to explore that movement on your own, at your own pace, where maybe every single day or every week you'll come up with a new way of coordinating that through exercises that you're making up on the spot to really systematically target the exact problems that you're facing. Whether it's something as simple as just slowing down the tempo, doubling things, quadrupling things, or dealing with exercises in terms of length and kind of breadth of how many notes you're including, to do it in sort of a fractal nature where just really zoom in as to such a small degree as necessary. And when that feels comfortable, then okay, pull back and turn up the tempo, expand the range or whatever. But
you have to start small, of course, to go big. You can't just like,
But I don't know that everybody has the same idea of what starting small really even means at this point. I see a lot of students that
it takes time.
Yeah,
it takes too much time. You can't invest that much time.
Right.
Now. Where's the app? Where's the app for that?
Right. Instant gratification is the expectation of instant gratification is a really big problem, and that's one of those things that differs greatly in my approach to my own education and as an educator versus the way that a lot of people in their 20s or younger feel about learning. I see a lot of discouragement, a lot more discouragement more quickly when things aren't really coming. It's like, dude, just plant the seeds and go at a tempo that you can handle. That where there is a tempo where we can do everything perfectly. The question is just, do you have the patience to slow it down to that tempo?
Exactly, and that's the hard part of it. I feel like, I guess it's like after every practice session, students would need like somebody to click a like button or something like that, so that they feel, thanks for caring.
Or even better, I feel like maybe this is, of course, we're quite a thought experiment, but maybe a valid one. If you were to live stream your practice session and the audience was already prepped with the knowledge that they should be liking or disliking based on your level of self-control, your ability to just stay the course. That wasn't quite it. Let me slow it down. There we go. Turns out this thing that I want to play at 120 beats a minute, and I started practicing slowly at 90. Actually, I needed to slow it down to 60.
And I think that would be also instantly, you wouldn't practice the same way as you would be practicing without a live stream, because you're like a lot more conscious, and you're like, okay, I know I can't actually do this in this speed. I need to take it down a notch. So
how people play or how people practice when they're being observed, when they know that they're being observed, is basically most people stop practicing. A lot of people just start whipping out things that they've already got in their pocket that they can already play.
They sound good on and just like flashy.
Which isn't really going to get you anywhere. I mean, sure, it might help your ego to get an extra little boost, but for me, the response is quite the opposite. It's, okay, I want to learn this concerto and a bunch of my neighbors can hear me, so I'm going to slow it down and play it so perfectly
that they move out.
But just make sure that, I always want to sound great. Right. Always. And I'm willing to play as slowly as necessary in order to make that so. And even if that means that I spend the next 3 minutes trilling between two notes, and the next 3 minutes after that trilling between the next two notes, or just breaking a phrase down into the most tricky parts that challenge my coordination, and just find, it's this interval that's really, messing things up, and this one interval, instead of just whoopsh, whoopsh, playing a phrase over and over and over again and hoping that, textbook magically insanity, right? And it's I just find it much better to just really zoom into that minute level and divide and conquer through that sort of systematic approach.
So very often, there's a bigger phrase, and then it's just that one interval, one passage from one note to the other note that messes everything up, and it's like, and you get it one time, and it's like, this was just an unlucky time, I'll get it next time, I'm sure. And then the next time, and the same. And it's really something simple. And it's something really simple, actually, a quick fix. If you would slow down, like maybe even for a minute, sometimes it only takes. But a minute is a long time.
Patience is something it's probably a bit harder to cultivate these days than it was even just 15 years ago. But it's absolutely worth it. Patience, really, and just playing long game, and knowing, like, I always have I know where I'm headed. I know that I want to include X, Y, and Z pieces into my programs, but maybe I'm planning a year in advance or something. I've learned the hard way not to commit to performing a piece until I know that I can do it. I've set myself up for some real big stress in the past, But I know that, say today my goal is to work on this concerto, and I get into it, start getting my hands dirty, and I find like, okay, I'm not going to get to the whole piece today. I've only got an hour and a half. I should really focus on zoom into this. Doable, yeah. And then maybe at the end of that process of finding what I really need to work on, it might be indistinguishable. You might not have any idea what piece of music I'm working on, even if it's quite familiar to you, just because I'm zooming into the molecular level and just making sure that it's all about coordination.
But I think it also gives you that gratification. Then if you work on something so small, you can get it, perfect or near perfect, and that's a lot better than just going through the whole thing and kind of like nothing
absolutely
happens. But I think it's also the patient thing. Maybe these days it's more kind of an analogy with business. You have to invest, this time, but in here you invest more time. And you might have, some startups you seem to go ahead there.
Make sure that doesn't happen again.
Grow maybe quickly, but you don't know. Maybe it's the 10 years in the past that they've been doing it in the garage that nobody knows. That's where all the magic happened. It wasn't like overnight. I mean, to the rest of the world, it seemed like it was overnight, but it's this long kind of thing.
Yeah, there's everybody gets to see when we perform, they get to see the product of the time that we spent programming, and they're not there with us to see what the process is, but there have rarely ever
unlike your neighbors,
unlike my neighbor. Well, now I rent a practice space because I really prefer
all those lawsuits.
But the thing is, there are very rarely ever major power up moments when it's like ta-da. When all of a sudden, something that was always technically so challenging is now just an ace up your sleeve. It really happens through the systematic, one tiny little victory after another, one great note connection, one great phrase, it's cliche to say, but there really are no shortcuts. But all you can do is, the best you can hope for is to have an unwavering goal of excellence. I don't want to use the word perfection. I hesitated there because perfection is
it's a tricky word.
But it's a slippery slope.
But
excellence. I strive to have as much resonance on every note that I can possibly create. I strive to have as clean a note connection between every interval as I can possibly make. To have the same sound quality and the same level of fluidity, regardless of what part of the range I'm in. And as long as you just never sweep anything under the rug and never say, it's close enough. I absolutely never say that. And which is the thing that leads me to the molecular level of something where I'm willing to actually make this a half an hour about trills. Instead of working on the piece, because really, if I can just get these trills down, I'll never have to practice the piece. It's the difference between giving a man a fish and teaching a man to fish, that kind of thing. I would rather simply ace, and I spend about 85% of all of my playing time working on simple rudimental exercises. Maybe some won't seem so simple to everybody, but really, in theory, they are quite simple rudimental exercises. Scales, arpeggios, trills, some half-step bending, things that really ensure that I won't have to practice pieces for that much. The majority of my time spent working on music is really just developing a concept of what I want it to sound like. And most of that happens when I'm on the airplane or the train, listening to various other examples of other people who've played the music. And just developing that concept, that's the work on a piece. I never have to slave. I hardly ever have to slave over a piece of music, even if it's a really difficult one, because again, just you learn it really slowly, and the brain kind of masters, okay, first I do this, I play this note, I play this note, I play this note, and even if there's quite a bit of space in time between those notes, you can just kind of crank up the tempo, and you've already got, the hard part is already done. So
playing fast is just the slow stuff sped up. It's not playing fast. It's just the slow things.
And the brain really mine at least seems to register those things as events. And as long as you program the events perfectly, and there's no guessing game left for the brain, there's no broken pathways or kind of lack of clarity. Once you know exactly, you go here, go there. And when I go to this note, I have to aim my air a bit lower and bring my bottom lip in a little bit more. My tongue goes up a little, coordinating all those things into said interval. And then I just get to enjoy playing the music. Right. Whereas most people, I feel like, and I've done the same in earlier days, just ruin pieces of music for themselves. It's just like it becomes this dysfunctional relationship. Right. It starts maybe as love-hate, and then pretty much the love is gone. Yeah. It's like, oh great, the Haydn again. Or something like that, whereas I try to preserve the magic with the pieces that I play and really show them that kind of reverence that comes from not having to listen to myself shit all over those phrases over and over and over and over and over again, thus imprinting the sound of myself sounding like crap while playing those phrases. So I get to preserve the integrity where a lot of the times, if I'm playing a piece of classical music for composed music, which normally isn't written for trumpets, it's normally coming out of the woodwind vocabulary or something, and I've actually got that clarinetist that's got my favorite version, or that oboist who has my favorite version. I have their music, their recording in my head, not my own lackluster practice time sound in my head. So I think that really helps. So.
Can you just say one more time about the shortcut thing? I think that kind of flew by so quickly. Just emphasize that one more time.
Yeah, sure.
That there are no shortcuts. I love this.
Yeah, it's an extremely cliche thing to say, but really the only thing we have is we've got ourselves in this present moment with whatever level of coordination we've managed to achieve to this point, and then getting to the next step with a piece of music, or being able to play a piece of music, or improvise over chord changes that we're not familiar with. It doesn't just magically, and maybe for most people learn faster than me. So for me, it's the point is even more magnified in my case, where I can't just look at we'll say a set of chord changes. I've already given a classical example. Set of chord changes, and if there are multiple scales that I'm not intimately familiar with, say, for this one I needed to really have the A flat melodic minor scale under my fingers, and it's not as familiar. I don't have the same relationship with that scale. And there's another one and another one and another one. I'm by the end of that day or the end of that week, I'm not going to be prepared to experience a sense of freedom of expression. I really, what I'll do is I'll say all the exercises that I'll play today, and maybe for the next few days, are going to be solely in the key of A flat melodic minor. And after 3 days or whatever of playing that scale, now I've made friends with that scale, and then I can experience a sense of communicative freedom. At least I can hang in a conversation about that subject and know what I'm talking about. And then I'll move on to the next scale, and the next scale, and the next scale. So eventually, once I've got a strong sense of connection or an understanding of how to speak in that tonality, then I will actually work on connecting the first chord to the second chord, the second chord to the third chord, building bridges from chord A to chord B, A to B, A to B, B to C, B to C. And this process of just learning one tune, for me, it's probably slower than for most people, like I said, but that's what I need to do in order to truly not be bullshitting. And so even just learning one tune, if it's not something that's really just kind of same tune, different set of, same changes, different tune or whatever, if it's something that's actually a new challenge, I'll spend a very long time doing these things. And another analogy being with, or another example being with technique, if it's just that I spend the day just working on the coordination between the movement of my tongue and the movement of my bottom lip versus my top lip, and making sure that I'm coordinating to the highest degree of accuracy possible the movement of the lips and the movement of the tongue at the same time. Those are things that really you can only experience one little victory at a time. Like one that click, that harmonic click right there, that one felt really nice. Okay, cool. And build off of that. And then that one felt nice. And don't settle for anything other than that. And we just tiny little celebrations where normally people would be much more masochistic and much more, I'm gonna hate myself and hate my playing until the day comes that I can stand on stage and victoriously shout, I did it, I performed this entire program of all my favorite and most difficult music in the world. It doesn't make any sense.
And then just put it away.
Right. But the reality is that madness lies that way, and the only thing that we can do is just celebrate every little juicy nugget of success that comes when we just wait. That's the articulation I'm looking for. Now let me do 100 more of those just to make sure that I have more muscle memory programmed in the way that I want it to be, not just my muscle memory being this dirty culmination of the trial and error process that got me there. So really, there are no shortcuts. What there is a long, and it doesn't have to be an arduous path, but a long and thoughtful path of dotting every I, crossing every T. And eventually, there are no more I's left to dot and T's left to cross. I've had the same technical ability since I was maybe 23, 24. I'm 39 now.
Anyway, so it's easier when you start young, plant your seeds right, do it right, and then it just pays off once you get older, and you don't have to put in as much work and just kind of...
For sure. The subject that you're starting to touch on is neuroplasticity and our ability to learn new things. And I can't say for sure if it's easier to learn something new or to create muscle memory when you're younger. I think will always be what we repeatedly do. Yeah. But the thing that the strong case to be made for really figuring this stuff out, the younger the better, is because it's one thing to learn a way to play the trumpet, a technique. It's another thing to learn that in the face of already having another muscle memory that I've been playing the trumpet for 40 years one way, and now this whippersnapper is telling me that I should become more efficient. But the problem is that this guy is going to have a really hard time circumventing his existing muscle memory, and actually honestly being able to switch off the autopilot and try a new way. Yeah. So the majority of, I guess, my failure as an educator is coming from there's no problem with the information that I'm delivering. It's just that when people have the uphill battle of circumventing their existing muscle memory, that touches on a lot of different topics, such as just the psychological approach, the emotional approach. Our inner saboteurs ask a lot of questions. Why should I be dealing with this in the first place? Isn't this good enough? Shouldn't I just kind of, I've already been on one path for so long, or what happens if I try this and is it going to screw me up? Am I going to, lose the ability to pay my mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. And there are so many ways that we can start to screw ourselves up as adults if we try to learn a different way to do something. The reality is that easy, without getting too deep into it, my technique differs from the common pedagogy not in every way, but in some very important ways. And I would describe the options of playing trumpet as really just just a fork in the road. There seem to be just two different ways to play the trumpet, with lots of variations on those two themes, but I refer to them lovingly as pissers and shitters. Just put your back into it and fight to get those high notes up there. That's where the common pedagogy brings you. Not everybody is willing to, because for instance, people who play orchestral music or whatever, when a certain beauty of, it needs to be built into the music.
Over all that.
Right. But that means that basically there are the rarer breed of trumpet players, like the Gabriele Cassone, who can play great modern classical trumpet, but also pick up natural trumpet, play the Brandenburg, and it's elegant. He's just a gentleman while he's playing it. He can access the upper register in a way that's compatible with the music that he plays. A lot of other classical trumpet players, for instance, are scared of the Haydn because of an E flat. and so in a lot of cases, the pedagogy either leads you to be a shitter or leads you to limit yourself below the range where you would have to become a shitter in order to, so either way, there's shitters or people who stop short of that. Or who do kind of start shitting a bit when they get towards high C. And then there are the people who stand there like statues and just, it's amazing to see. And I made that transition from shitter to pisser many years ago out of necessity, like anybody who's ever made that transition. We don't just
evolution.
Do it. Yeah. Just
You're forced to sometimes.
I can't do my job this way. I'm gonna have to learn an easier way to do it. And so that process is a very emotionally challenging process because it's not so much about, it's not hard to play the way that I play. It's actually quite easy. It's a hell of a lot easier than the common pedagogy has taught people to play. The problem is that, again, you're coming up against this resistance, this physical resistance because you've got existing muscle memory, and then this mental resistance because you're scared shitless to try something new. But the reality is, and coming back to the point that I wanted to make, is just that it's not going to mess you up to try something an easier way or to try something a different way because muscle memory is so deep and it's so hard to get rid of. And I've seen so much evidence to that point. For instance, comeback players, people who haven't even played the trumpet in 30 years. Their last kid has finally gone off to college and they bought themselves a shiny new trumpet and they want to get back on the horse. And what do in the first lesson? They play exactly like they did when they were in college. Like not, with the same endurance or anything, but with the same tics and isms and, tensing the same groups of muscles. And I mean, muscle memory dies real hard. I can still play like a shitter if I want. When I demonstrate, I've never forgotten that technique. So there's nothing to be scared of, basically, is the message here, that you really can try. You can engage yourself in a in a process of trial and error, and try to really honestly limit yourself to being able to play only the things that you can play with a sense of ease. And just say, okay, so if that means that for the next month, I'm not going to even touch a high C or go beyond it or whatever that is, whatever that final note is where you notice it starts to, just say, okay, that's it, done. At the end of that month, you are not only will you have improved your technique, but you won't have forgotten how to play a high C in the old way. But you'll hopefully have discovered a new way, an alternative path that's a lot less physically challenging, physically taxing. So that's the thing. There's really nothing to be scared about. I highly recommend to all of you watching that you really draw up a policy and adopt this policy, a zero tolerance policy for any strain, for any forcing. That's the thing. And you see me doing all this stuff that looks like I'm forcing in videos. And that's really just because people watch and they listen with their eyes.
Right.
And while I could sit here and go and just be stone-faced, and I can demonstrate to you and to the audience the game that I play with myself when I'm practicing in front of a mirror, which is that I practice as if I play this imaginary game that I'm looking at a picture of myself, not actually looking in the mirror, and I maintain this expectation that there's going to be no movement, and whenever there is something, my brain goes, because we're really good at pattern recognition or motion recognition, so. I can do that, but it's just not as fun to look at for the audience, so they think that it's not as impressive. So just to
you need to keep it for the skeptics,
Yes, to address any questions of hypocrisy or whatever. I'm saying you really do. If you draw that line in the sand and say zero tolerance policy for any straining, any forcing whatsoever, and I'm only willing to do whatever I can do with that sense of ease and effortlessness, then, and obviously in a rehearsal and on a gig, you got to do what you got to do. But there's no reason why you can't have that policy enacted in your practice time, and then just as you develop more and more coordination in the easier way of doing things, then you can start to replace the method that you're using in the performance or in the rehearsal. So it was this kind of partition in the hard drive that I set up for myself in my early 20s when I was in Blast, jumping around, dancing, doing insane choreography while playing. I was practicing one way, and I was a barbarian on stage, and it was that those barbaric actions that let me know that it was really apparent to me that I was going to hit a wall pretty soon. 8 shows a week. It was just kind of,
it's going to hit you.
Yeah, and I saw it coming, and so I preempted that inevitable failure on stage by just starting to, I was a barbarian on stage, but like a scientist, monk, warrior, in the practice room, and there were 2 very different versions of me. A version of me off stage that was never touching high C, was mostly spending 2 or 3 hours a day on the mouthpiece.
But see, that takes guts to see that you're gonna hit a wall. A lot of people just don't want to accept the fact that they're, it's coming, 200 miles an hour. You're gonna hit it, but it's like, no, I'm gonna be fine.
I'd like
just a rough patch.
Yeah. Well, there's a fine line between being an eternal optimist and being an idiot, right? Yeah. So I opt for realism in every case, and it's, if you can see that, recovery time becomes more and more necessary, that the swelling and the tension in the lips isn't getting better, it's getting a little bit worse. There's only one logical conclusion to that, and of course we can construct this big process of warming down and warming up and all these things and buzzing and take out the tuning slide and come up with all these ways to apologize to our face for the mashing that we gave our lips. Or we can just say, we should probably let me just back out of this and develop an easier way. And for every trumpet player that I see just ready to bust, their face is wide open when they're in the middle of a rehearsal with me, whatever. It's just.
Speaking of rehearsal, you're about to have a concert, I think, in 15 minutes. I think we should probably wrap this up. Just one word, I heard you're doing or about to do something also on YouTube, I think. Is that true? Like a teaching or something like that?
Oh, I'm going to, not on YouTube, but I'm going to be finally releasing an educational website, a pretty big educational website very soon.
Awesome. So stay tuned, look for Adam, and wow,
Facebook,
that was awesome.
Instagram, I'm there.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
What?
So you can hear that here, apparently.
It's quite similar to Bulgarian women's choir. The first 3 chords.
All right, it'll be over soon. That should be my intro, maybe for the channel. I don't know.